Welcome to Our Drummers Musicians, your backstage pass to Melbourne's vibrant music scene. Recorded on a cosy couch in Brunswick, join us as we explore what it truly means to be a musician and speak to the diverse talents that make music in our city. I'm your host, Luke. Today we're joined by Louis Smith, an accomplished classical and contemporary guitarist, academic and composer based in Naarm. Louis is currently pursuing a master's research degree in performance with a focus on integrating contemporary guitar-based musical styles and aesthetics into classical concert music. Louis has been a key member of the instrumental trio Fuzz Meadows, known for their heavy and beautiful soundscapes. He also plays in the shoegaze and post-punk band Silurian, contributing to their 2023 album. Currently, Louis is involved in several exciting projects. He is a founding member, songwriter, guitarist, and lead singer of the band GUSH, a member of the heavy alternative band Resenter, and part of the ambient duo Lilivm with Emma Maguire, where they explore sound abstraction, minimalism drone, and shoegaze to create a dreamlike musical experience. With a bachelor's and honours degree in classical guitar, Louis has a rich academic background and has received various awards for his musical achievements. Join us as we delve into Louis' journey, his diverse musical projects, and his passion for pushing the boundaries of guitar music. We want to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present.
This is really cute.
Oh, I'm so glad. There's some water for you.
Yeah.
You got a cup of tea.
Tea.
I'm just going to turn this off. But if you get too cold, I'll turn it on and sacrifice warmth for white noise.
I understand.
Yeah,
Have you
thanks.
gotten into the plugins that like reduce like white
Oh my gosh,
noise?
Scout, stop looking. No. I haven't. But only because I'm too lame and it's like more learning.
Yeah.
But
It's
I've
like
heard
a
that
headache.
you can just like press a button and it will like remove that stuff.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Gomi did it in the studio with like one of the mics. I think it was like a contact mic on the piano. And he just like denoised it. And it was like, significant.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just got like a really cheap, it's free.
Yeah.
So cheap, it didn't cost me anything. Like little like
The cheapest.
demo vocal pack.
Oh, sick.
I follow this guy on Instagram. I can't remember what his name is, but he always recommends like the best free plugin every week or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Do you know the guy?
I think I know the guy, yeah. And I got some good ones from him. I think like Analog Obsession do these like preamp strips or like tube saturation type like EQ kind of plugins that are for free.
Nice.
Yeah, they're really good.
He recommended me the like Universal Audio new like tape
Oh,
ones,
yeah.
like a couple weeks ago, and I got them and they were really fun.
Yeah.
And I found this vocal like just like a de-esser and a de-plosive and
Yeah.
a de-click, which is quite good just for like
Awesome.
all the smacking of lips of
Yeah.
podcast guests and stuff.
Totally.
But yeah, I haven't dived into the like super smart stuff like the denoiser.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe you can give me a lesson.
I feel like I know shit about that. I'm always like, embrace the noise.
I just started like taking some photos with like editing some photos.
Yeah.
Someone showed me the like AI denoiser from like the photographs.
Yeah.
And it's wild. Like,
Yeah.
But I think I prefer it with the noise in. Like it looks too fake. And like,
totally.
I was shooting in a low light band room.
Yeah.
So it's like if you suddenly like it's like perfectly black and it's like, oh, that's a bit weird.
Yeah, and this is the vibe of it. Yeah, it should be like the difficulty of capturing like a low light image should be like reflected in the amount of like imperfections there is. Yeah.
It's like as close as I can get to like shooting film without the cost of shooting film.
Totally.
Just dealing with digital noise.
Yeah, totally.
Just try to be authentic to it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my housemate Liam's like right into that. He's stopped doing like band photography because he can't afford it. Like in terms of because he was shooting on film.
Yep.
Yeah, and he was getting super burnt out, but it was also like just like a big effort to like archive it all, get the negatives back, and like develop so much film, and then buy the film, and then only ask for like $100 or something.
Oh,
yeah,
that's wild. Because it costs like at least $1 a shot if you're shooting with like cheap film.
Totally.
So like,
you got to make everyone count.
Yeah. Wow. No wonder he like needs to charge more than $100 a shoot.
Totally. And if bands are only getting like $200 a like show, then it's kind of like, what's the point?
It makes it so hard, right? I was talking with one of I can't remember one of the more recent podcast guests, but they were talking about how, like, because pre-sale tickets are so low at the moment, like it's really hard to get people to like buy tickets in advance.
Yeah.
It's then really hard to be like, well, I'd really like a photographer to come to this launch gig or whatever, but I don't actually have the budget for it yet because no one's bought it. So like, oh, okay, well, I can't afford the photographer or like the video to shoot the live gig or, you know. How are you feeling about the GUSH launch, single launch show? Like,
I'm feeling pretty good. Like, it's weird. I'm supposed to do another post today, but like the single comes out on Friday, and I feel like that will build up enough momentum for people to kind of like jump on. Cool. Like, we've got like good interest and good numbers, but I feel like, I don't know, it's all like smoke and mirrors sometimes. Like, you just never know who's going to show up. Mm-hmm. I think like I'm confident that we'll get more than like 60 people there.
Yep.
And that would be like a fun time, especially in that space. But I've gone through so many like I don't know, like different varying like thought patterns around like promotion. It's like, let's like promo the fuck out of it, and it'll end up like being awesome, or like, you know, but for some gigs you just like don't do anything and they end up being awesome. It just like really depends on the night. And like, I'm like this myself, like I don't really plan what I'm going to do on the weekend till like the week of the show.
Yes.
Yeah. Or like I have it in the back of my mind, and then it's like really solidified like the week of. Yeah. And then sometimes like the day of, it's like, oh, I can't be bothered going. So yeah, it's just, I can't be bothered like writing the emotional kind of journey of, I guess like, you know, are you going to come? Like, is people going to come? Like, what's the stats? What's the numbers? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't look at the pre-sales before.
Okay.
Yeah. I let Alice do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. If everyone's got their roles, I guess, in the band, you can worry about the stuff that you bring to the table.
For sure. Yeah. But yeah, promo is like one of those things where I never signed up for it, you know, as being a musician. It was like this thing that you have to learn and that is imposed on you, because I guess it goes back to like maybe like a bigger question of you know, if you're a musician, like how much does the audience like impact your musicianing, not just in terms of like who you play to, but like the reasons of you making music. I think at one level it's both like I guess you're doing it for yourself, but you're also doing it in this, I guess, like guise of performing in front of people. Like there has to be like some kind of listener, if that's like figurative or like actual. So yeah, it's like, but then that actually kind of being kind of put down to like metrics and like numbers and stuff is a different thing together. Yeah.
I feel like you have quite like an interesting like trio of worlds.
Yeah.
Like you have your classical guitar thing.
Yeah.
Well, like I call it a thing, but like you're doing your masters and you did a bachelor in classical guitar. So like you're super proficient at that.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I guess like the art music of like, you know, contemporary classical.
Yeah.
But then you've also got the like sound music that you play.
Yeah,
which
totally.
is, I guess like in some levels like similar to like the art music type like concepts of like exploring sound.
Yeah.
And then you've got like GUSH and a bunch of other bands that you're with now and like have been with previously that are in like the band scene.
Yeah, totally.
How do you like go with like thinking about all these like concepts of like, oh, well, like audience and who am I making the music for and like all of that? And then like, how do you do it with like each different thing? Is it all different, or are you just like, oh, well, I'm playing music today. It just happens to be, you know, I'm doing extended, I don't know.
Yeah, techniques or something. Yeah, that's a good question. I think Yeah, like it's hard to pin down. I think a lot of my thought comes from like the classical music, I guess like mindset of like people performing for like purely the music, and that not should be, but that is like the main thing, and that is what attracts people to it and attracts people to come and like see something, because they want to see something that is like quite profound and maybe hasn't been heard before. I don't think that's the best like mindset, especially it gets super conflicted. Yeah, it doesn't really work in the band scene because of like so many people like playing like in similar styles as like, you know, my bands, and just like an oversaturation of that kind of music. But I guess like for me, I was thinking about this just like before like just this morning around kind of my journey as like a guitarist, and yeah, like being a classical guitarist is probably like the start of like, maybe not the very start, because I always wanted to like play rock, but it definitely, classical guitar like has informed my like musicianship and musicality like a lot more than I think like rock music has. Like rock music has in terms of like timbre and like a particular like feeling that I want to achieve with music, but in terms of the ethos and in terms of the I guess kind of striving for like interest and technicality, like classical guitar and wider classical music, especially contemporary classical music, has definitely like informed my position as like as a musician. And yeah, and it's funny because like, you know, I go to a few like contemporary classical gigs and there's like people there, but it's never like as packed as like an egg punk show, or like it's never as yeah, I guess kind of like it's not really popping off. And I guess that music like doesn't really pop off, and that's the point of it, is to kind of like introduce you to like an experience that you haven't experienced before, and maybe some like people like taking seriously some concept, not even musical or musical, and just like taking it to its like furthest kind of reaches. And yeah, I think that is the thing that draws people in, but it's not in this kind of like economy of like listening and I guess like attention. It's not very it's not very, I guess, kind of attractive maybe. Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah.
How did you start then with guitar, if it wasn't like, if you had the enthusiasm for rock? Like, if we go back to like your origin story, what was the first thing that like got you into music?
Okay, so I've always been surrounded by music with like, especially my dad's musical taste of he was really into the like the no wave music of like the 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, so
like what kind of bands is new wave? Because it's
complicated because I hate like genre terms, but I guess like in terms of musical style, talking about everything that came after punk with like the ethos of punk, of the like DIY kind of ethos, and trying to, you know, sing about stuff that isn't about love.
Right.
Or not necessarily about love, or if it is about like relationships and stuff, it's about kind of like a different side than this more commercial kind of thing. It's like it can be gnarly guitar music, but it isn't metal, because at the time like metal was super like pantomime, and like hard rock was, you know, about like Dungeons and Dragons and shit, and that wasn't real. So a lot of the music is kind of based about like real life experience and trying to like get to something a bit more I guess real. Yeah, it isn't as, it's not necessarily like an escape to another world. It's more kind of like a representation of like someone's like experience.
Sure.
So I guess in terms of like music for me, like growing up, like the Go-Betweens were played like heaps for me, like as a little kid. And then I remember getting really into U2 when I was like 5 and 6, which is kind of awesome. Like, I listened back. We only had like a bunch of like compilation CDs of like best ofs.
Oh yeah.
I think for a lot of those bands, that was actually a better thing than like the actual albums. Like I've gone back and like listened to albums start to finish and they're good, but also the greatest hits sometimes are just like the greatest hits. And it's like really fun to just listen to like a bop after like one after the other.
Yeah.
But yeah, U2 was like a big thing for me. I didn't really understand, like, I knew it was guitar music, but I didn't understand how effects driven it was until like later in life, which is kind of interesting.
What do you mean by that?
That just like the edge is, it's so funny. Like it's kind of dumb how like effects driven his whole like practice is. It's awesome, but it's also like he's got like 3 effects techs like building him different pedal boards for like a song.
Wow.
And he would just like play 2 notes and it'll sound like this whole like orchestra type thing.
Okay.
And a lot of their songs are like based around that kind of like effects. Like they're kind of a shoegaze band, but like I would be, you know, it's like sacrilege to call them a like shoegaze band. Yeah, and then I listened to I remember listening to like the White Stripes Elephant album, which, you know, starts off with Seven Nation Army. And there was one song particularly on that like excited me beyond anything else. There was like the song number 2, Black Math. It starts off with this kind of like jangly, almost like 12-bar blues kind of like progression type thing. And then like halfway through and it's like the guitar's like overdriven and it's like super garagey and driving. Then halfway through the song, everything cuts out and there's this like one like power chord section that he like clicks on like a big muff. Well, what I know now to be like a big muff fuzz. Mm-hmm. And that sound was just so exciting and so like apocalyptic that I was just like, what is this? I remember as like a 8-year-old asking my teacher, like, how do I play this part? He was like, it's just an A chord. Just play it over and over again. And I was like, no, it's not. Because, you know, at the time I just had like a acoustic guitar. I didn't know anything about effects. And yeah, I was just so obsessed by that sound and like the heaviness of it and how it was like so like exciting. And I mean like literally like the signal is excited by like so much distortion. It's clipping so much that all the like partials are coming out. But yeah, that was like a moment where I think something clicked for me where I was like, this is so cool. Like I want to just do this. I want to play this chord. I want to do this in my life. Yeah. And then like after that, you know, I started listening to Nirvana and like some of like Green Day and stuff. Like Green Day wasn't cool at the time. I think American Idiot just came out and I remember listening to that a lot and really loving, like, is his name Billy? Yeah. Like Billy's voice. Okay. And they're kind of stupid long songs. I've listened to it again, like later in life and it's not as cool, but at the time it was really cool. But yeah, like Nirvana was like super big for me. I think listening to those songs, like that's what a rock band for me like is, and right. Like what rock music signifies is that kind of like songwriting, that kind of quiet, loud dynamic, and that I guess like guitar sound as well, where it was like the White Stripes kind of big muff sound, although like not necessarily in some parts, but it had that like weight to it. Yeah. But of course, because like I'm by myself most of the time, like I tried making a band in primary school and it didn't really work out. But yeah, a lot of the times because the guitar was like a very like solitary journey for me in terms of like learning. I couldn't make these sounds. Like I couldn't have the means to, I guess, like find the effects to like play like that, or even have the patience to figure it out, or have other people to play with to like, you know, help create that. I ended up like getting really into classical guitar because you can do it with just like a nylon string like instrument by yourself. Like super satisfying to play the harmony and the melody at the same time. And I think from there, even though there was like parts where like I did really love it, but I didn't it wasn't as exciting as like the rock guitar kind of thing for me. There was something really like satisfying in it. That kind of, and I just like kept on going with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then between like probably like 12 and 16, I didn't play electric guitar at all. It was just all just classical guitar.
Right.
I was listening to, I started getting into following that like feeling and trying to find that kind of like apocalyptic guitar sound. I ended up listening to, like starting getting into like metal, and then because no one around me listened to that, I ended up listening to some really cringy like metalcore stuff that was happening in the late 2000s and the early like 2010s. And then that made me start listening to like hardcore and stuff. And then kind of from there, a lot of my like musical identity was like built around like these like heavier kind of bands.
Right. So did you have this like duality of like you're listening to heavy music, but you're playing classical music?
Yeah,
okay.
Totally. And
wow.
I would like sometimes listen to classical guitar music, but a lot of the time I would just like listen to heavy music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was funny, like thinking back on it now, it seems really weird because a lot of the things I listened to digested and then kind of regurgitated in my playing and in my songwriting. But back then, it just wasn't at all. Like my listening habits were just so like, polar opposite to like, well, not polar opposite. There's like, this kind of, there's lots of like similarities between like metal and classical music, like in terms of virtuosity and using particular like harmonic movements and but I wasn't really seeing that at the time. Yeah.
It's so interesting. Like, so many people listen to the thing that they're trying to play.
Yeah, totally.
And you've had this like sort of very separate listening experience that, later in life you're reflecting on it, being like, oh, that's kind of similar. Like, from all these like technical or like musical perspectives. But at the time it was just like, oh, I'm loving playing this. Yeah. I'm loving listening to this.
Totally. I think all of my guitar teachers, more my classical guitar teachers, were like metalheads as well. Oh. So that like, is
that common?
I think so.
Okay.
I think, if you're into guitar music, I think you can't not like respect like this, whole style of music that's based around the guitar. And it's based around, I guess, like the power of the instrument, but also like it celebrates its like virtuosity.
Mm-hmm.
And is quite like progressive in terms of, well, I use that term very generously, but can be quite progressive in terms of like supporting people who are trying to do like different things on the guitar. Like lately I've been going through a Meshuggah phase again, and this, the Swedish experimental like that's they're like this extreme metal band that is basically the whole thing is like polyrhythms.
Okay.
But like not polyrhythms in terms of polyrhythms over 4.
Right.
So it's super groovy because you always have like a backbeat.
Oh.
So like the cymbals like counting crotchets and the snares like hitting 3 or like 2 and 4, but like his feet are like catching all the guitars, kind of syncopated riffs, and they'll have like a riff in like 17 and they'll put it over 4 and then they'll like cycle that through until it like comes back on 1.
Right.
Yeah. And then the harmony and stuff changes. Like they just kind of know what's up and they want to trick you, but they're like one of the biggest metal bands in the world. And listening to it was kind of like, this is like crazy. Like this is kind of both like super like intellectual, but also like quite groovy. But like, you don't see that in like pop music at all, where you get like a pop group that has like their whole thing is doing polyrhythms or some shit.
Yeah.
And so like, I think about metal and think about like all the shit things, that it is quite misogynist, that it can be like quite like racist, and how it's based on this very like masculine idea of like power.
Right.
But also it kind of is really progressive musically in a lot of ways.
Okay.
That like, you know, a band like Meshuggah can be like one of the biggest metal bands in the world.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think where was going with that? I can't remember.
I don't remember either.
I think it teaches like being metalheads, being like a common thing.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think like in terms of like if you're into like guitar music, it's like such a vast like pool of like interesting
Right.
like performers, musicians that use guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of undeniable, I think. Yeah.
Well, if we dive into like current classical guitar, Louis.
Yeah. So like 2024 classical guitar me.
Yeah. Like, you know, because you went to like VCAS and then you've done your undergrad and, you know, you won a bunch of like classical awards and stuff. Like,
yeah, true.
You know, you're like a classical virtuoso on the guitar.
Yeah.
But now you've gone back to like do a master's.
Yeah.
After like a couple of years.
Yeah.
Away from like the academic pursuits.
Totally.
What does it feel like now for you, having, you know, spent some like quite a lot of your time like doing the band scene, but coming back to like, you know, reinvigorating your like classical guitar passion?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think at one level I have a lot of imposter syndrome around like, oh, I've spent like 3 years not practicing, when like practicing was like an everyday thing for like most of my life. And so, yeah, I guess kind of there's that classical part in my head around like, you know, like you're not in shape. You're not like worthy to come back and like, you know, have your own spin on stuff because you need to like have mastery over all of these things. But then there's this other thing of me being kind of like, that's bullshit. And like, you know, I want to make this whole like part of my life more me. Where, you know, through my undergrad, I did a lot of like traditional classical guitar repertoire, a lot of like 20th century classical guitar repertoire as well. And I would say I specialized more in that area, but I did play a lot of stuff that was, you know, common in terms of the canon of classical guitar. And now it's like really trying to... My supervisor, the head of guitar at the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music, Ken Murray, he kind of said to me one day that like it's really interesting that all of these, talking about my previous teachers, like saying he was like, it's really interesting that their listening habits are totally in contrast to their playing habits. And I think I took that really seriously and was like, yeah, I want to play music that I actually want to listen to. And not in the, it's not like I don't want to listen to classical guitar, but like it's not like I want to listen to it all the time or like put it on. And so I feel like going back and studying is like going on this journey of like, who am I and how do I find this person and how do I like present it like, musically. So I feel like I'm still in this like transitory like spot of like finding that out. And for me, it is like a fusion between like the electric guitar practices that I've done like through my bands and through my like listening and like learning those things, but also fusing it with a classical sensibility around I guess like listening to the detail of the sound, finding interest in texture, finding interest in the like trying to interpret and express like particular like aesthetics that you know in a, like a very detailed way, which you get like in band music, but it's not as like explored.
Right.
Yeah. And so through my masters I'm primarily focusing on electroacoustic guitar performance.
What does that mean, electroacoustic?
It basically just any sound of the guitar that's processed by something electric. So it can be like me playing classical guitar and playing a piece that's for like classical guitar and delay pedal. And so I have a little pickup on my guitar and play it through a delay pedal, and it's this whole like work that revolves around this like rhythmic like interplay between these two, like the wet signal of the delay and the dry signal of the guitar. Or even playing like to an electronic like backing where it's like the sound of the guitar it in its acoustic form is like presented, but then it's like overlaid with this like extra sound that is like both contrasting but also accompanying
Right.
the sound. And then it goes straight down into like electric guitar playing of like, I think like all electric guitar, it's about like the processing of the sound of the guitar in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do you think then, like, it's interesting that you say like, oh, well, I haven't practiced for 3 years. And
it's not entirely true.
Yeah.
Like, I play guitar every day, but...
Well, that's the thing. Like, lots of people put like lots of different labels, I guess, on what like practice is.
Yeah.
But even like your journey of experimenting with like the manipulation of sound through all these different effects, like as someone who's like watched you develop over the last 10 years basically with GUSH, like I've seen you sort of like do these deep dives into like different sounds and different pedals and different ways of like using your amps and different amps and different cabs coming through and like maybe you weren't like, practicing your classical stretch exercises, but you were being like, oh, well, how do I manipulate the sound through this pedal? And what is it about that? And
totally. Yeah. How do I express the thing that I want like in my head? That's a great point, because it has been like a constant journey, and it's something that like every time I play, it's like, is this the perfect sound? Is this the perfect sound for what I like want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And quite often, I would say like 98% of the time, it's like no. But then again, like I think sometimes I can confuse that can be like an arrangement thing, and that can also be like a perception thing where because I'm in the room in front of my amp, I'm not hearing it in the same way as a microphone would in front of the cab, or like in a band context, I'm not like out the front like watching the band, I'm like in the band playing amongst like the instruments. And I think like part of like the whole classical thing, and what is amazing about classical music, is people's attention to detail. And I think like heaps of contemporary guitarists like have this, like, a classic example is like Kevin Shields, of, the guitarist of My Bloody Valentine, like spending years and years and years just like making like cow noises on his guitar, but it needed to be the right like cow noise. And then, and that like attention to detail is like a very kind of, I think, like classical thing, where you get, when you're interpreting classical works, the composer puts so much detail into the score that like it needs to be at this volume, it needs to be kind of having this timbre, this is like the emotion that it's trying to convey. And I think from learning how to, I guess, like do that like on paper, it translated for me like through kind of this pursuit and like tone. But I think it's like always there in like other musicians, and especially contemporary musicians, that difference is really interesting. Part of like my research in my master's is talking about how a lot of electric guitar techniques have developed from contemporary music and not like classical music.
Right.
Because the electric guitar is used so much more in contemporary music, and it's like, it's iconic there. And a lot of classical music uses quotations of those particular styles. Well, I think it's like intrinsically quoted, in classical music, because like the works that have electric guitar, predominantly written after the electric guitar has been like popularized.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't have electric guitar without someone in the audience like being reminded of Jimi Hendrix,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like, it's funny because I think the pursuit of tone can be, well, it's monetarized. There's a whole like, there's a whole industry of like capitalizing off, I guess like people's, people trying to like get the best tone. Like if you buy this pedal, it's like you're gonna sound like Jimi Hendrix. If you buy this guitar, like, where they sold the Fender like guitars with the reverse like pickups to like, emulate like Hendrix's tone, like. And there's a whole, it's really interesting because there's this like super traditionalist I guess like cohort in contemporary guitar practices, which is like, yeah, we want to still play on things that were made in the 50s, and like the golden era of guitar was like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and like, yeah, that is what is authentic to the instrument. But then you get like, you know, people just processing the guitar through like computers and using like digital everything, digital amps, digital cabs, digital effects. And, you know, sometimes that can be like, yeah, some of that music is quite like soulless at one level, but it also is really interesting because it is pushing the boundaries of what like can be done. And I think people can use it in super tasteful ways. And it's almost like overwhelming, you know, being like, my instrument can sound like raindrops on a tin roof. Like if I want it to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess kind of, like this obsession with like texture and the obsession of like the detail in it can also be super, I guess like stifling at one level. Like one can have too many options. And I think like this argument of like authenticity or, and like progression, I think the people in that like camp of wanting to sound like Jimi Hendrix kind of, this is their reaction to that. It's like, it's just too much. It's too much to think about. I want to like play guitar and make it sound interesting just by playing guitar rather than by affecting it.
Yes.
In crazy ways.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, having a balance between the two things is something that I think I'll forever be figuring out. And going, yeah, to like polar opposite sides and then trying to find somewhere in the middle. But yeah.
Well, so if we like put a pause on the like master's thesis pursuits.
Yeah.
What's the like current workings of your different noise projects?
Yeah. So
and maybe could you describe what that is? Because you're the first. I think we were going to have Lilivm on the podcast, but we had to reschedule. So I think you're the first noise artist.
Sick.
Yeah, on the podcast.
I guess like I wouldn't particularly call my practice noise.
Okay.
I'd call it more like ambient music.
Explain for me, please.
Noise? Yeah, for sure. Noise, I think there's just a lot of people out there that would just be like, noise music is like amplifying literal noise. Like the god of noise music, Merzbow, he performs with this like tin banjo that has springs as strings and then has a contact mic like picking up like the soundboard and stuff, and then through effects and processing he makes noise music. But it's like the impetus, there's no string, there's no like note, there's no like resonant like frequency in terms of like that can make a perceivable like, I guess kind of note.
Right.
And noise music is based on that. Is based on like amplifying noise and playing with texture just purely through like a noise kind of perspective. And I guess like, so I'd say kind of like my music more falls into like contemporary classical ambient music, where I do use like predominantly like my guitar to create like different textures. And I got, for ages, I think, you know, I was really into like really washy textures and super like reverbed kind of things because it sounds really nice. You know, you just play something, put reverb on it, and it's like instant like mood. But now like I'm getting into more like, yeah, kind of not completely like disregarding that. But yeah, I played this work by this Australian but London-based composer called Lisa Ilian recently, called Tiding, and it used like a non-tempered tuning. And so
what does that mean? What's non-tempered?
So basically like our tuning system in Western music is based on the fundamental of like 440 frequencies, or like an A is 440.
Yep.
And you tune everything to like a relative of that like partial. That's why, yeah, on your tuner it has like 440 hertz. So like all the strings are vibrating in harmony with that 440. Or yeah, for any instrument, it's kind of tailored to that. Non-tempered tuning is basically taking let's say like in the context of this piece is like the grand fundamental of 11 hertz and making everything vibrate on partials of 11 hertz.
Wow.
And so it sounds, well, firstly, it sounds out of tune. But secondly, the more you listen to it, it sounds extremely natural. And she describes it as a natural tuning in the same way as you like go to the beach and you like hear like the different sounds and the ambiences, and not that like things are particularly pitched, but some, you know, bird calls can happen and that kind of adds to this like, you know, that kind of the melody over the washiness of like the wind and the ocean being kind of like the harmony. But yeah, things of you know, natural things don't operate in this like 440 like hertz kind of realm. And so she was trying to like describe this more like naturalistic representation of like music through like these different tuning systems.
Right.
Yeah, basically it's like, yeah, you tune your guitar to like different notes, and some of the notes are like, you know, 15 cents out of tune to like 440. Yeah, and then yeah, it creates this really interesting sound world. So at the moment I've been experimenting with that.
Wow.
And yeah, just trying to figure out like how to use alternative tunings in that way to describe like an emotion. It's kind of like, you know, maybe John Butler was on this like for the whole time and just wasn't telling anyone about it. But you know, like I feel like he kind of popularized open tunings. Where you would just like play anything on the guitar and it would sound good, but it would sound like in that particular, it would be in that sound world. It's kind of like doing that, but like making it more crazy and making it more kind of like intellectualizing. It's funny because I really don't like John Butler. Like I think I would have had a phase.
Okay.
Maybe I'm stepping on people's toes, but I think it's just not for me.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's funny to think that like he's basically doing the same thing as what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all music and
Totally. Yeah. Everyone's using, whether they are aware of it or not, everyone's using some kind of conceptual like framework. Yeah. And he's probably like tuned to that because it sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're tuning to it because intellectually you can say that if I divide all these frequencies by itself, it lines up with this other frequency.
Totally. Yeah. And explores some other like sound world that could sound totally whack, but be at least interesting. Yeah.
The thanks for explaining the difference with like noise and sound and ambient music.
No problem.
Sorry for using the noise term.
No, it's so fine.
I've learned something new.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problems.
So, because you kept using the word sound, I noticed, is like sound just like I guess like the most broad term, and then it's like, well, you probably sit in like the ambient music sub-genre
totally
of sound?
Sub-style.
Or something? Sub-style. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess kind of ambient music, you know, I think it just came from, I think Brian Eno coined it and wrote like a little, like couple of page manifesto on like ambient music.
Yeah, well, I guess too, I called Carl a noise artist, but we won't be a noise artist. He'll also be an ambient artist.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Noise musicians are pretty crazy. It's like, you know, I live with one. It's awesome. But, you know, they're like it's very like anarchist. Like,
Right.
I think the aesthetic of that is very, you know, they even have a symbol, which is like, you know, two like quavers, like the classic like music like symbol in a circle with like a line through it being like no music.
Wow. Yeah, so it's really like abstract of pitch.
Yeah.
There's
completely.
no pitch in like noise music.
Yeah. It's all just like different versions of white and brown and whatever noise there is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess kind of ambient music is such an umbrella term, like to people with like totally polarizing types of, I guess like musical practices could be labeled as like ambient music. But I think ambient music is, I think, just trying to do what a lot of music is trying to do, where it's like really narrowing in on like a certain feeling and trying to like explore that in normally like a longer form than most. Yeah, it's kind of hard because it's so broad, you know. Like a lot of my, you know, listening to ambient music, like Aphex Twin, you know, like does a lot of ambient stuff, or like stuff that's classic. Even his like dance music, it is really like ambient. But I feel like William Basinski has been like a big influence on me. He normally works with tape loops and the disintegration of tape loops.
Right.
So like over an hour, he'll like be, you know, playing a certain tape loop and then like manipulating it so that like layers of sound from the tape is slowly kind of being accentuated or like being stripped away just by like the mechanics of the piece of tape going around, like the reels like slowly changing and disintegrating. And yeah, I think like ambient music for me has like very strong lineage to like minimalism, which I was like kind of obsessed with, like in terms of like classical music styles. Like definitely like minimalism is like something that has always like fascinated me and something that I've always been like really drawn to. But this idea of music as a process of listening rather than just like, you know, you present a song, it's like you present an idea that changes over like a long amount of like an extended period of time that becomes like your perception to it and the context of you listening to it is constantly changing, even though the music isn't really changing. And I find that like super interesting.
Yeah.
It's like making the listener become like the musician at one level because they're like processing the music in a different way. Yeah, it's like almost like, and I think that's what I love about it, is that it like it feels quite inclusive. You know, you're not just like a passive listener listening to a song. It's like you end up becoming like an active part of the music by like staying on this journey like with the music for so long.
Thanks for drawing the perspective to like minimalism.
Yeah.
I'd never thought about it in that same like way of like it's about how you're listening. Because I did like a styles and composition subject of VCE, and we did a deep dive on like, minimalism.
Yeah.
And you know, it was mostly just Philip Glass, like Metamorphosis, and the film he made like in the 80s, like
Einstein on the Beach or something. No, that's an opera.
It's like Cayenne Nistimo or something.
True.
It's like it accompanies this like film, and it like shows like the decline of like civilization.
Cool.
Like it starts off like really slow and just slowly speeds up like these images of, you know, traffic and then cities and like fields.
True.
And then it becomes like everything's like the planes are crashing and the buildings are falling down.
Yeah.
And the music is just relentless.
Yeah, totally.
But that like you're just like sitting in it and it's like nothing's changing.
Yeah.
Like in the Metamorphosis or something. Like it's like, oh, like I've heard this bar before.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And it's changed like into this other thing. Oh, yep. No, now we're back to A. And just the like unrelenting nature of the changing from A to B is such like an interesting listener experience.
Totally. I think there's something really human about it, because I think like humans are really bad at thinking ahead. Like, you know, we have like our subjective like experiences of the present and have like a memory is attached to the past, and like, you know, also have a perception of what's going to happen in the future. But it's very hard, I think, for people to like think in a way that's like that can see like the whole like progression and like of even like, you know, the whole like climate, this is going on a bit tangent, but like the issues of like climate change. Like, I think people can't conceptualize, like, you know, maybe not their children, but their children's children and their children's children's children's, like, lives. It's too far removed. And I think, like, minimalism at one level, like, really kind of explores that part of, like, of, like, humans, of not being able to kind of, like, see, like, ahead. Like, it's like, you know, you're stuck in this thing that you don't realize is changing. And there's this constant tension because it feels like it isn't changing, but it is changing. and it will kind of, it's like representative of that, like, I guess kind of the stasis that we all believe is true. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that way before.
Yeah. But I guess like minimalism and ambient music, I think, is very like hand in hand. I think it works on that same principle of like, is this background music? Like, what are you doing while you're listening to it? Quite a lot of the time I'm like writing when I listen to ambient music, or like drawing or doing something else rather than just like listening to it.
Right.
Like I've been to like concerts where you just like sit and listen, and that is really lovely, but I don't really practice that at home. I think it's very hard, you know.
Yeah.
Unless you have like a really awesome sound system and a space that you can curate to be like completely dark, or have like a certain visual attached to it. I think that kind of music is supposed to be listened to in accompaniment to your life.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I guess like a podcast listener generally does not sit down and listen to a podcast.
Totally.
It's while someone's cleaning the dishes or going for a walk or
100%.
whatever. Like, it's an accompaniment to life.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we should have like an ambient listening session.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to experience that with you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
play like Dead Fish or something.
Sure, whatever. Oh, as in like the game.
Yeah,
Sorry, I thought that was a song.
No, like the
niche artist or something.
The classic like kindergarten game.
Yeah,
and then put on some like Basinski.
Nice
and vibe. Yeah.
Well, we've been doing this little segment on the podcast. Where I get each guest to ask a question of the next guest.
Yeah, true.
But because no one knows who the guest is,
yeah,
it's this like fun interplay and tension that sometimes comes with like what direction are the questions going to go in, and is the question applicable to the instrument or artistry of the next guest?
Yeah, cool.
So I've got a question for you from bass player Owen Downey.
Yeah.
To our next guest, what are your personal goals for you and your music over the next 5 years? And what are your hopes for the music scene in Melbourne over the next 5 years, in a very practical way?
This is really funny because I feel like I'm very like esoteric, unpractical in terms of like my view on music. So I like this contrast. Okay, so I gotta remember the question. Firstly, it was like, what is my 5-year kind of practical, like a goal around like where my music will be, or like where
yeah, kind of like where's your music in 5 years, and where's the Melbourne scene in 5 years?
Yeah, I think for my music in 5 years, I think I don't really care like what it is gonna be. I think it's like, as long as I'm like feeling the same sense of like interest in what I'm doing, and a progression in terms of trying out new techniques, trying out new sounds, trying to fuse like my whole kind of musical being into like maybe like one project, seeing how that manifests through the ambient stuff, through my classical stuff, through like the band stuff as well. I'd love to, like, I still will be playing rock music, and probably, I think like different bands, maybe I'll be in different bands. Maybe, I think GUSH will always be together. I think, we've made it this far. Like, I don't really see it imploding anytime soon. But I think like everything that I want to do, like with my, like, I guess kind of with my music, will like make itself apparent through like the process of just like trying out new things and being excited by music and being influenced by it and trying to like tackle that. The Melbourne music scene in 5 years, I feel like that's kind of, it's hard to think about because like I don't know, it seems it makes me think of like, you know, those movies that are like, you know, the year is 2029 and you have like flying cars and like everyone's like uploaded to the web and stuff. I think at one level it like won't be too different to what it is now. I think there'll be different trends in music that like always cycle through. Like at the moment, just like because my band's on the emo like spectrum that are, like, you know, informed by like I guess like the rock of the 90s. You can call that grunge, you can call that like post-hardcore, you can, yeah, there's heaps of, I guess, like genre terms for it, but I think like keeping it general, like the rock of like, or like, and post-rock and stuff, but yeah, are informed by the rock of the 90s, and that's like becoming like, that's like trending at the moment, which is really interesting. And it's really interesting to see like bands popping up trying to like emulate this new kind of 90s sound.
Right.
And aesthetic. Yeah. And I think like that will, you know, die out in like a couple of years. Or not die out, but it like people will move on to the next thing. I think like the Melbourne music scene's always gonna have like retain like core bands that just want to do their own thing and will just be relentless around like playing, and aren't too bothered by like the comings and goings of like those trends. But I think like there'll be different things like popping up, you know, and I'm kind of excited to see like what happens next. Like we'll probably have like a new metal revival, like that might be a new like in swing in 5 years, which would be hilarious. Like that stuff is like so awesome because it's so obnoxious. It's so obnoxious that it's like undeniable. But but yeah, I think as well, like economic, I think, you know, it's really hard to predict where the scene will be in 5 years, especially because like I think it, you know, the scene is based on real practical things like venues, and that's like, you know, venues come and go because of like economic situations. And yeah, like I think we'll have to save the toad again. I think there will be comings and goings of like different places to play, but in Melbourne there will always be like places to play, I think, that will like foster like new and exciting acts. This is very much like in the perspective of like my interpretation of the scene, which is like very much like original bands playing original music. And I don't really know much of like the corporate kind of world, even like different scenes like the jazz scene and stuff. Like I don't really know what's going on there, but in terms of like band stuff, there will always be some excited kids wanting to play music and putting on their own shows, and I don't think that will ever like stop. Yeah.
Well, what would you like to ask our next guest?
That's really tricky. Maybe I'll ask them something that I feel like I've been like struggling through. Okay, to the next guest of what's it? Our drummers, musicians. It's on your hat. Okay, so the next guest is our drummers, musicians. Firstly, welcome to the show, and secondly, my question for you is, how do you like? Does the music you play currently reflect your whole being as a musician? And if no, I guess why not? That's no judgment attached to that. But yeah, also I guess like it would be awesome to hear your thoughts on how much of a I stuffed up this question already, but how much of your overall musicianship is reflected through your actual playing?
It's a great question, and thanks for sharing so much about like all the different things you're thinking about in terms of that, like the like excitement, but also like grappling and intellectual analysis of all those different aspects of like, you know, what you're thinking about because of your masters, but also the other bands and
totally.
just like where it sits in and how it connects to you. Like, yeah, it's big stuff. So thanks for sharing it with me.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for letting me talk about it.
No, of course. Well, we've finished the podcast with 5 short answer questions.
Awesome.
So
Let's go.
and feel free if you would like to put on, like let's say the like with Gush and with your classical music or something. But
awesome.
Favorite venue to play in Melbourne?
Okay, this one will be, I'll do both. I'll do with classical music. The room at the new Con building in South Bank, I think it's the Hanson Dyer recital hall is epic.
Okay.
Like the acoustics are just phenomenal. You hear anything in that room, like it's crazy. Like it's like, the same level as like the recital center.
Wow.
Yeah, it's magical to play in. And I guess like with Gush, I love playing at the Tote downstairs. I think I love playing it so much is because like the house sound guy Anton really likes us and puts in for us, which is awesome. But it has a great sound system and it's got a good vibe. Yeah, so I'd say like Tote downstairs. Yeah.
Dream venue to play at?
Oh, see, like I think some days I'd be like, yeah, Forum. Like the Forum would be epic. Like I love how kind of like otherworldly it is. You walk in, it's got the fake like sky, like it's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think so I guess like the Forum, but also I know that like the onstage sound is going to be whack. Like I've never played in a band like on like a festival stage, but I know it's just like you have to like run so many things through the fold back and so the Forum, if I can turn my amp up really loud, that's the one condition.
What is your coffee order?
Coffee order at the moment is I'm like so changeable. I change it up all the time, but it's got to be like a soy cappuccino. Yeah. I've been getting into drinking long blacks, which, it's putting more hair on my chest than I would like, but,
What is your favorite place to get food after a gig in Melbourne?
Okay, I never remember the place's name, but there's this ramen bar between Burke Street and Lonsdale Street on Russell Street across the road from 170 Russell. That's like open till 3 a.m. And you playing like a gig at like Cherry Bar that we have like a couple of times. It ends really late. There's always some crazy shit that goes on there, and you just like debriefing over like ramen is like the best.
Nice.
Yeah, where you're just super tired and yeah.
All right, and final question. What advice would you give to younger you?
I would give so much advice to younger me. I would firstly say that whatever you want to do is valid, and that don't worry that you're not fitting into the mold of both a rock musician or a classical guitarist. Just like really commit to doing stuff that excites you and always just keep on doing that.
Thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
It's been great.
Yeah.
If, I like to put up some like links to artists and stuff on the website along with the episode.
Yeah.
But if we were to direct people to like one place, is there like somewhere where people can go to like stay up to date with like, what you're doing with your different projects?
I need to sort this out. I think probably my like personal Instagram. Yeah. Would probably be a thing. I'm like I don't post much at all on that, but I'm going to start to post on that a bit more. Cool. And just, because it's so good for being like, hey, I'm doing this. I hate social media and the rut that it puts me in. So there's this constant tension behind that. But I think it's like it's a way to communicate like what you're doing. So I guess my personal Insta, and through there, like in my bio, I'll put up links around like what bands I've been a part of, and yeah, music that's like interesting. And
cool.
Yeah, it's all scattered everywhere. Like there's some classical stuff on YouTube through like the uni. There's you know, all the different bands and like, you know, their respective band camps. Like I've got my own band camp that I've only like put up like an album on. I haven't like done anything new on that for a while, but yeah, I think I'll condense it into the Instagram.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll put links up to all of it on the website,
Awesome.
so people can just click through to, you know, see videos of you play and albums and stuff like that.
Sick.
But cool to know that going forward, you know, potentially there'll be some consolidation. So
Totally.
people can follow you on Instagram.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I can promote my amazingly boring life.
Oh, well, thanks so much for doing this, Lou. It's been really fun.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Our Drummers Musicians. I hope you enjoyed getting to know another Melbourne muso like I did. Help us grow by leaving a review, share the podcast with friends and family, and subscribe on our website for extra info. Got a guest you'd love to hear on the show? Please let us know at ourdrummersmusicians.com. See you next time.